The medical bay's lights flickered as another explosion rocked the human defense station. Commander Ross pressed his hand against the wound in his side, watching as his soldiers fought bravely against the overwhelming Krev forces. The aliens had attacked without warning, their purple-scaled bodies moving with frightening speed through the corridors of the station. "Hold the line," Ross shouted, firing his rifle with his free hand. The air smelled of burnt metal and plasma discharge. Around him, his unit, 20 of Earth's finest, maintained their defensive position, protecting the wounded civilians being evacuated behind them. The Krev's energy weapons lit up the hallway in brilliant flashes of green. Through the chaos, Ross could see their mandibles clicking in what he had learned was their expression of battle joy. These aliens loved war, lived for it, but they had never faced humans in a full-scale conflict before. Until now, it had just been border skirmishes and small fights over resources. A young private named Mark fell beside Ross, his chest smoking from a direct hit. "Stay with me, soldier," Ross said, pulling him behind cover. But it was too late. The boy's eyes stared emptily at the station's ceiling. The Krev pressed their advantage, their superior numbers forcing the humans back step by step. Ross knew they couldn't hold much longer. "Team 2, report evac status." "Last civilians through the escape pod, sir," came the reply through his comm unit. Ross allowed himself a small smile. At least they'd achieved their primary objective. "All units, fall back toe." His order was cut short as a sonic grenade detonated nearby. The world went silent, then black. When Ross opened his eyes, he found himself kneeling on cold metal floors, his hands bound behind his back with energy cuffs. Around him, the surviving members of his unit, about 50 soldiers in total from various parts of the station, were in similar positions. They were in what appeared to be the cargo bay of a Krev warship. A tall Krev officer walked among them, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the harsh lights. Unlike humans, who had long ago learned to separate the necessity of war from the joy of it, the Krev saw combat as entertainment. They filmed their battles, broadcast their victories, and treated warfare like humans once treated sports. "Your species," the Krev officer spoke in slightly accented English, "has been a constant annoyance. Small, soft creatures who refuse to accept their proper place in the galaxy." He stopped in front of Ross. "But today, we will teach humanity a lesson about challenging their superiors." Ross looked up at him, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. "We were defending civilians, non-combatants. By attacking them, you violated the galactic conventions." The Krev officer laughed, a harsh clicking sound that his translator rendered into something almost musical. "Conventions, rules of war. These are the concerns of weak species." He turned to face a hovering camera drone. "Today, we show the galaxy how the Krev Empire deals with primitives who don't know their place." Ross felt his blood run cold as he realized what was about to happen. He looked around at his soldiers, brave men and women who had signed up to defend Earth and her colonies. Some were barely out of training. Others were veterans of a dozen battles. All of them knew, as he did, what was coming. "Any species that needs rules for warfare," the Krev officer continued, addressing his audience, "is too weak to deserve survival." Ross could feel the camera drone focusing on him. In that moment, he thought of Earth, of humanity's long history of warfare, of the darkness that his species had learned to keep carefully contained. The Krev were about to make a mistake that would unleash something they couldn't possibly understand. "Last words, Commander," the Krev officer asked mockingly. Ross looked directly into the camera, knowing his next words would be heard across the galaxy. His voice was steady, almost calm. "You have no idea what you've just started." The Krev officer raised his weapon. The camera drone recorded everything. And across human space, millions watched as 50 of their soldiers were executed in cold blood. The war had just changed. The room was silent as the video feed ended. Admiral Stone stood at the head of the emergency council table, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of holographic displays. Around him sat the highest-ranking military leaders of Earth's combined forces. None of them spoke. None of them needed to. The silence was broken by General Reed, his fist hitting the table hard enough to make the displays flicker. They executed them, broadcasted across the whole damn galaxy. "The Krev think they've shown strength," Admiral Stone said, his voice steady but cold. "Instead, they've made the biggest mistake in their species' history." He pressed a button, and new images appeared above the table, classified files that only a handful of people knew existed. The files showed weapons systems, ships, and military capabilities that humanity had kept hidden since they'd first reached the stars. Earth had learned from its own bloody history, learned to keep its most dangerous weapons secret, its true military strength concealed. "Protocol Omega," Stone announced, and several council members inhaled sharply. It was a contingency plan created for exactly this type of situation, but no one had ever thought they'd need to use it. "The Krev believe they know what humanity is capable of," Stone continued. "They've seen our public forces, our peacekeeping fleets, our defensive capabilities. But they've never seen what we can do when we stop holding back." Across Earth and its colonies, a strange calm had settled. There were no riots, no public outcry, no immediate retaliation. It puzzled the Krev observers who watched human space, expecting chaos. They didn't understand that this silence wasn't submission. It was preparation. In hidden shipyards throughout human space, vessels that didn't officially exist were being activated. Soldiers with training that wasn't on any public record received their orders. The machine of war that humanity had hoped never to use was quietly, methodically coming to life. On the Krev homeworld, High Commander Dax watched the humans apparent in action with satisfaction. He stood in his war room, surrounded by subordinates who celebrated their victory. "See how they cower," he clicked to his officers. "The execution of their warriors has shown them their place. They will submit to our demands now, or we will destroy more of their kind." A junior officer approached with a datapad. "High Commander, we're detecting some unusual energy signatures from the direction of human space. They're very faint, but probably they're ships hiding in fear." Dax dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. "Send out an announcement. Tell all Krev forces to prepare for the human surrender." But in a secure facility deep beneath Earth's surface, Admiral Stone was issuing very different orders. He stood before a group of commanders, each representing a special operations unit that officially didn't exist. "For years, we've kept our true capabilities hidden," he told them. "We remembered the lessons of our past, that showing all your strength often leads to unnecessary wars. We built our public forces to be just strong enough to maintain peace, while keeping our real power in reserve." He looked at each commander in turn. "The Krev think they've seen humanity at war. They haven't. They've seen humanity maintaining peace. Now, they're going to learn the difference." Commander Wilson, leader of the first strike team, stepped forward. "Rules of engagement, sir. Minimal collateral damage. We're not them. But the Krev military structure ends today." Stone's eyes hardened. "Show them exactly why humanity learned to put limits on warfare." As the commanders left to begin their missions, Stone watched the latest Krev propaganda broadcast. They were still celebrating, still believing they had won a great victory. They would learn soon enough. Humanity hadn't survived its own violent history by being weak. They had survived by learning to control their capacity for war, and by being very, very good at it when it couldn't be avoided. The hunt was about to begin. The Krev outpost on Moon Base Delta 7 was considered untouchable. Protected by energy shields, automated defense systems, and a garrison of elite troops, it had never fallen in its 100 years of operation. The base commander had just finished his nightly security check when the lights went out. "Status report." He barked into his communicator. Static answered him. In the darkness, shadows moved. Not the clumsy, lumbering movements the Krev expected from humans, but something else. Quick, precise, silent. By the time the emergency lights kicked in, 3 sections of the base had gone completely dark. Intruder alert in Section 4. A voice screamed over the comm. They're not showing up on thermal scan. The transmission cut off. Commander Wilson moved through the base like a ghost, his stealth suit bending light around him. Behind him, his team of 12 operators cleared sections with terrifying efficiency. Their weapons made no sound. Their movements left no trace. They had trained for this mission for years, waiting for the day they would be needed. The base's shields hadn't failed. They had been bypassed. The automated defenses hadn't malfunctioned. They had been blinded. This wasn't the crude, straightforward warfare the Krev had expected from humans. This was something else entirely. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out at other Krev military installations. Ships disappeared without a trace. Bases went silent. Supply lines were severed with surgical precision. And most importantly, there were no survivors to tell what had happened. On the Krev Central Command Station, High Commander Dax received report after report of lost contact with outposts and ships. Impossible, he raged, throwing a data pad against the wall. How are they doing this? Where are they striking from? His tactical officer, usually confident and composed, seemed to shrink in his armor. Sir, we can't track them. Their ships don't show up on our sensors. Our advanced warning systems don't detect them. It's like fighting ghosts. Meanwhile, on the human stealth carrier Shadowpoint, Commander Wilson's team returned from their mission. Their operation had been perfect. The Krev base neutralized, its strategic data captured, and no evidence left behind to show how it was done. Next target, Wilson asked, studying the holographic map showing Krev military positions throughout the sector. Many markers had already gone dark. The Krev shipyards in the Proxima system, his tactical officer replied. Intelligence suggests they're trying to rush new warships into production. They're panicking. Wilson allowed himself a small, grim smile. Good. The news spread through alien space like wildfire. The Krev, who had so proudly broadcast their execution of human prisoners, were now suffering defeats they couldn't even explain. Their allies began to distance themselves, not wanting to share their fate. In a bar on a neutral space station, an alien merchant told his friends, I heard a Krev battlecruiser disappeared last week. Just gone. No distress signal, no debris. The rescue ships found the entire crew in sleep pods, floating in space, every single one alive but unconscious. Now that's a message. We could kill you, but we're choosing not to. Back on the Krev homeworld, High Commander Dax received a message from Earth. It contained no threats, no demands, just a simple statement. Commander Ross warned you. This is only the beginning. That night, Dax doubled his personal security. It didn't matter. When he woke the next morning, he found a human military badge on his bedside table. How it got there, no one could explain. His guards had seen nothing. His security systems had detected nothing. The message was clear. The humans could strike anywhere, at any time. And the Krev, for all their military might, were powerless to stop them. The hunt wasn't just beginning. It was already everywhere. The trading post on Station 7 buzzed with nervous energy as aliens from a dozen species gathered to share stories. In the month since the humans had begun their campaign, the galaxy had changed. The Krev, once proud and fearless, now jumped at shadows. A merchant captain from the outer systems spoke in hushed tones to his audience. My ship passed near the Krev military base on Outpost 19 last week. It was completely intact, no battle damage, no signs of fighting. But empty. The entire garrison had vanished. They found them 2 days later on a civilian transport ship, all alive but with no memory of how they got there. At another table, a Krev security officer drank heavily, his purple scales dull with stress. We can't stop them, he muttered. Our best shields, our strongest weapons. They mean nothing. They're not fighting like warriors. They're hunting like humans, finished another alien, its crystalline body dimming with fear. In his command center, Admiral Stone reviewed the reports from his strike teams. The Krev's military infrastructure was being dismantled piece by piece. Their allies had abandoned them. Their trade routes were disrupted. And still, not a single civilian casualty had been recorded. "Sir," his aide reported, "Commander Wilson's team just completed their mission at the Krev's main shipyard. They didn't destroy it. They reprogrammed every computer system to play Commander Ross's last words on an endless loop." Stone nodded. The psychological impact was as important as the military victories. And the other teams? Team 3 left messages carved into the personal quarters of every Krev admiral. Team 4 disabled their largest weapons facility without setting off a single alarm. Team 7, the aide paused, checking his notes. Team 7 somehow rearranged an entire Krev battle fleet while the crews slept. The ships now spell out surrender when viewed from space. The legend of the human ghost ships spread through the galaxy. Stories told of vessels that appeared and disappeared at will, of soldiers who moved like shadows, of weapons that could disable entire bases without firing a shot. The Krev's allies began to see them differently, not as victims, but as fools who had awakened something terrible. On a secure channel, the leaders of 3 major alien confederations spoke in private. "The humans," said the first, its tentacles waving nervously. "They're not what we thought they were." "Did you see what they did to the Krev's pride of the fleet?" asked the second. 100 ships, crewed by the finest warriors in their empire, found drifting in space, every weapon disabled, every system wiped clean, and a simple message left behind: "We could have killed them all." "We must learn from the Krev's mistake," the third leader declared. "The humans weren't weak. They were controlled. And now we know why." In his private bunker, High Commander Dax reviewed the latest losses. 57 bases, 38 ships, countless soldiers who could no longer fight, their minds wiped of critical military knowledge. And still, the humans hadn't killed a single Krev soldier. "They're showing us mercy," his advisor said quietly. "That's what terrifies our troops the most. We wouldn't have shown mercy. We didn't show mercy. But they're better than us, and they're making sure we know it." A message appeared on Dax's screen. Simple text, untraceable, running out of places to hide. He looked at the latest casualty reports, or rather, the lack of them. The humans were systematically dismantling the Krev military without taking a single life. It was a demonstration of power more frightening than any amount of bloodshed. The legend grew. The hunters moved unseen, and the Krev Empire began to understand that they hadn't started a war. They had awakened a giant that had been purposely sleeping. The Krev homeworld's capital city had changed. Once proud military buildings stood empty. The streets, usually full of warriors showing off their battle scars, were quiet. Fear had done what no enemy had managed in 1,000 years. It had driven the Krev to hide. High Commander Dax stared out the window of his underground bunker, watching security feeds from across the planet. His empire was crumbling, not through violence or destruction, but through the precise removal of everything that made the Krev powerful. "Another military facility has gone silent," his last remaining advisor reported, voice shaking. "Like the others, no damage, no casualties, just empty. They're getting closer to the capital." Dax's claws dug into the metal desk. How? How are they doing this? Where are our soldiers?" "We found some of them," the advisor said, "working in civilian hospitals, teaching in schools. They remember nothing of their military training. It's like they've been reprogrammed." On the human stealth carrier, Shadowpoint, Lieutenant Parker prepared her team for their most daring mission yet, infiltrating the Krev homeworld itself. Their ships, invisible to all known detection methods, slipped through the planet's defenses like ghosts through walls. "Remember," Parker told her team, "we're not here for revenge. We're here to show them why humanity chose peace not out of weakness, but out of wisdom." The Krev's planetary defense grid, their pride and joy, didn't even flicker as the human ships passed through it. Years of studying Krev technology in secret had paid off. Every system, every security measure, every failsafe had already been compromised. In the streets of the capital, rumors spread faster than official news. Stories of entire military academies being transformed overnight into civilian schools, of weapons that turned into farming tools, of warrior training grounds becoming parks and gardens. The humans weren't destroying the Krev civilization. They were transforming it. An emergency meeting of the Krev High Council descended into chaos as reports flooded in. Their military infrastructure wasn't being destroyed. It was being repurposed. Their soldiers weren't being killed. They were being reformed. "This is worse than death," one council member screamed. "They're changing who we are." In orbit above the Krev homeworld, Admiral Stone received Lieutenant Parker's signal. The infiltration teams were in position. With a simple command, they could disable the entire planet's military capability. "Send the message," Stone ordered. Every screen, every communication device, every public display on the Krev homeworld suddenly showed the same image. Commander Ross and his soldiers, moments before their execution. But this time, something was different. The humans were shown defending civilians, protecting the weak, choosing mercy even in battle. The message was clear. This is who you killed. This is what you failed to understand. In his bunker, Dax received a private transmission. A human face appeared on his screen. Lieutenant Parker herself, somehow broadcasting from inside his supposedly secure facility. "Your empire was built on the idea that strength means dominance," she said calmly. "We're showing you a different kind of strength. You killed our people to prove your power. We're sparing your people to prove ours." Dax looked at the security feeds again. Human operators were everywhere now, moving openly through the streets. His soldiers, those who still remembered they were soldiers, didn't even try to fight. They had seen too much, learned too much about what they faced. The breaking point wasn't marked by a great battle or a decisive strike. It came in the moment when the Krev, as a species, finally understood what they had awakened. They had believed humans were primitive because they chose peace. Now they understood. Humans chose peace because they were so very, very good at war. The Great Hall of the Krev High Council had never been so quiet. Where once proud warriors had boasted of their conquests, now subdued figures sat in silence. On the massive display screen before them, Admiral Stone's face looked down at the assembled Krev leadership. "You believed you knew what humanity was capable of," Stone began, his voice echoing in the hushed chamber. "Today, you learn how wrong you were." The screen split into multiple sections, each showing different aspects of human military capability that had been kept hidden. Stealth ships that could bend light itself, weapons that could disable entire fleets without destroying them, technology that could rewrite memories as easily as writing words on paper. High Commander Dax, now under guard by his own people, watched in growing horror. "All this time, you had this power." "For generations," Stone confirmed. "We fought our own wars, nearly destroyed ourselves, learned the price of unchecked aggression. When we reached the stars, we chose a different path." The displays showed more. Massive shipyards hidden in dimensional pockets, armies of automated defenders that could be activated with a single command, planetary shield technology that made Earth's defenses virtually impenetrable. "Your sensors never detected our true capabilities because they were looking for weapons of destruction," Lieutenant Parker explained, standing at the chamber center. "We built something different. Weapons of transformation. Technology that doesn't destroy, but changes. Doesn't kill, but converts." Around the chamber, Krev Council members shifted uncomfortably as they realized the full implications. Their society, their military, their very way of life. All of it could have been erased. Instead, the humans had chosen to demonstrate their power through mercy. "The soldiers you executed," Stone continued, "were part of our peacekeeping forces. They used minimal technology, fought with basic weapons, showed restraint in every encounter. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. The screens showed footage from the past month. Krev military bases transformed into civilian centers, warrior training grounds turned into parks, weapons factories converted into medical research facilities. All done with technology so advanced it appeared like magic to the Krev. "We didn't want this revelation," Parker said, looking at each council member in turn. "We were content to let you believe we were simple, straightforward warriors. It was safer that way, for everyone. But you forced our hand when you executed prisoners of war." Commander Wilson's voice came next, broadcasting from somewhere in the Krev capital. "We didn't want this war. You chose it. You thought you were teaching us a lesson about power. Instead, you learned one about wisdom." The displays showed one final image: the memorial erected on Earth for Commander Ross and his soldiers. It wasn't a monument to their deaths, but to their lives, showing them helping others, protecting the weak, choosing mercy over violence. "Your empire stands at a crossroads," Stone declared. "You've seen what we can do. You've seen how easily we could have destroyed everything you built. Now, you must choose your next step carefully." Dax, his pride finally broken, stood slowly. "What are your terms?" "Terms?" Stone's expression softened slightly. "We don't want to rule you or destroy you. We want you to understand what real strength is. Your empire can survive, but it must change. Like humanity did, you must learn that the greatest power isn't in the ability to take life, but in the choice to preserve it." The council chamber remained silent as the truth sank in. They had thought they were dealing with primitive warriors. Instead, they had awakened guardians who had spent generations learning to control power greater than the Krev had ever imagined. The revelation was complete, and with it, the galaxy would never be the same. 1 year after the execution of Commander Ross and his soldiers, the galaxy had changed. The Great Hall, where the Krev had once broadcast their victory, now hosted representatives from 50 species for the signing of the Galactic Convention on Warfare and Peace. High Commander Dax, no longer wearing military decorations, stood before the assembled delegates. His once bright purple scales had dulled with age and wisdom. "My people's greatest mistake," he began, "was believing that restraint meant weakness. We learned differently." Admiral Stone sat in the front row, watching as former enemies became partners in peace. The past year had seen the Krev Empire transform. Their military academies now taught strategic peace alongside combat. Their warrior traditions remained, but with a new understanding of when to fight and when to show mercy. The convention's first article, announced the neutral mediator, establishes that advanced civilizations have a duty to show restraint. Power comes with responsibility. The humans have demonstrated this principle. In Earth's orbital shipyards, the once hidden fleet was now visible to all. But these ships no longer inspired fear. Instead, they served as a reminder. The most dangerous species in the galaxy were not those who displayed their weapons, but those who had learned to keep them sheathed. Lieutenant Parker, now Commander Parker, stood on the observation deck watching ships from various species dock at the station. "Strange," she said to Commander Wilson beside her. "A year ago, most of these species wouldn't even trade with us. Fear made them avoid us," Wilson replied. "Respect makes them seek us out." Below them, in the station's main plaza, a memorial had been erected. It showed Commander Ross and his soldiers, but not in their moment of death. Instead, it depicted them in life, helping others, protecting the weak, showing the mercy that their executioners had failed to understand. The Krev delegation approached the memorial, laying down their traditional weapons as a sign of respect. Their young warriors, once taught to despise mercy, now studied the human way of controlled power. "Tell us again," a young Krev asked an Earth instructor. "Why do humans train so hard to fight if they prefer not to?" The instructor smiled. "Because understanding the cost of war makes us value peace. Being strong enough to destroy but choosing not to. That's true power." In his office on Earth, Admiral Stone reviewed the final reports. The Krev military had been completely restructured. Their empire had transformed from an aggressive force into a stabilizing one. Other species, watching this transformation, had begun to change their own approaches to warfare. "Sir," his aide reported, "the last of the hidden fleets has been registered under the new convention. All species have agreed to the principles of restrained warfare." Stone nodded, looking at the holographic display showing the galaxy's new peaceful trade routes. Commander Ross would have appreciated this. Their sacrifice, terrible as it was, changed everything. Across the galaxy, the story was told in countless variations, how the Krebs' greatest show of force had revealed their greatest weakness, and how humanity's greatest show of mercy had revealed their greatest strength. In the Krev homeworld's new Council of Peace, the chamber where the execution had once been broadcast now played a different message on loop. Power without wisdom destroys itself. Strength without mercy defeats itself. Victory without honor betrays itself. The final piece of the memorial was unveiled, a simple plaque that bore Commander Ross's last words, but now with a new meaning. "You have no idea what you've just started." Below it, a response had been added. "And what we finished was not a war, but an age of unnecessary violence." The galaxy had learned its lesson. The humans had kept their power hidden not out of fear, but out of wisdom. And now, that wisdom would guide not just one species, but all of them toward a better future. The age of unrestrained warfare was over. The age of enlightened strength had begun.